support.
The maestro, please!
End of the month and last pop analysis of spring. And since the last day falls on a Friday and that's when we do Record Rundown, you're getting it a day early. Today we'll be looking at Fortnight by Taylor Swift, featuring Post Malone.
Taylor Swift.
Honestly, you should know who Taylor Swift is by this point, even if you're not a Swiftie. This is the 6th time we've gone over her. We've done 5 Taylor Swift pop analyses, so I guess I'm just gonna rattle them all off.
What is happening to me? I don't wanna live. Need to calm down. You're being too loud. All too well. It must be exhausting, always rooting for the anti-heroes.
Even since all of those, she has yet to still get more pop hits because she's Taylor Swift, most notably from her previous album, the Taylor's version of 1989, which had both
And what it costs, now that we don't talk. What do you
and
Is it over now?
Post Malone.
good ol' Austin Post, aka Post Malone. We first talked about him way back in 2017 with
I've been fucking hoes and popping pillies, man, I feel just like a rock star.
and then a second time on that Spider-Man movie soundtrack.
You're the sunflower, you're the sunflower.
Been up to a lot since then, even later that same year as the Spider-Man movie got another pop hit.
Run away while we're running in circles. Run away.
And even still to this day, with much more recently,
I had some help. It ain't like I can make this kind of mess all by myself.
Background.
Fortnight was released on April 19th, 2024, charting just 2 weeks later at number 1. It stayed there for 2 weeks until being displaced due to a diss track that was related to a prominent rap beef that is possibly still ongoing between one Compton-based artist and one Toronto-based artist. Regardless, Fortnight is off of Taylor Swift's latest album, The Tortured Poets Department, which was also released the same day. Fortnight is the first and currently only single off this album, but I'm sure she's going to release more singles. Besides Taylor Swift and Post Malone, the only additional credit on this song is one, of course, Jack Antonoff. Jack Antonoff is one of Taylor Swift's mainstays, having been on essentially all of her songs and most of the Taylor Swift pop analyses that we've done. Obviously, since we just talked about another Taylor Swift song just last year, he hasn't actually had time to get any other pop credits beyond Taylor Swift. Fortnight is released solely by Republic.
Form.
Fortnight is a down-tempo electro-pop and synth-pop song, is 3 minutes 48 seconds in 4/4 time, B major, and 96 beats per minute. After the quick fade-in at the beginning, Taylor Swift starts us off with the first verse.
I was supposed to be sent away, but they
She then takes us into the first chorus.
and for a fortnight there we were forever running to you so.
Once we get into the second verse, Post Malone joins her on the back half of the second verse, going back and forth.
It's ruining my life.
And the duo continues into the second chorus.
Tom and Tom, my sweater, now you at the mailbox tent.
In the bridge, we get a lot of back and forth between Taylor Swift and Post Malone.
Only a fortnight. I touched you.
And then finally, in the outro, we predominantly get Post Malone with Taylor Swift joining in later. Which leads to both of them ending the song.
Won't start till I touch you.
Bass.
One of the few, if not arguably only instrument that plays throughout the entirety of the song, constantly doing these repeated eighth notes, starting off on that low E, then going to that F sharp, dropping down to the D sharp, and then going back up to the G sharp. It then repeats both the bars of E and F sharp, and then drops all the way down to that low B, and then dropping down even further to that low G sharp. Given between each bar, sometimes there are some passing tones to give it a little bit of movement.
synths.
The synths make up the rest of the instrumental, besides the drums, obviously. And there are a number of them, some of which really only play once or are used as an effect. Regardless, the most prominent synth we get at the very beginning, doing these sort of arpeggiated soft chords. The chords it actually ends up playing, in the first couple of bars anyway, are a B major over F sharp and then a D sharp minor over F sharp. Note though, that's not the actual harmony that ends up resulting when you hear the entire instrumental. We'll touch on that at the end. In the following phrase, that main synth kind of constructs this F sharp major chord before kind of not really giving us another chord, to be honest, and we have our first instance of an additional synth with that E up top at the beginning. As the song goes on, we get various elements added to it, for example like this one with a guitar. It has a bunch of effects applied to it, so you might not even know it's a guitar, but it's basically playing this F sharp dominant 7 going to this B chord before doing this weird C sharp dominant 7, given it's not playing the third. Again, really just added in for effect, and again is also not the main harmonic progression that we have in the song, but you know, just spelling out the chords so you can hear kind of what's going on. Oddly enough, every time that guitar effect does come in, it repeats it every phrase without really changing anything, despite the fact that the harmonic chords that the bottom synth is implying do change. More synths come in even later in the song. Notice in that first bar, we have that B, very much almost sounding like a bell, but when that synth returns, it has these weird effects to it, very much changing its timbre as it fades in. It stays on that B for a while before starting to move up and down between an A and a B. Notice how it fades out at the end on that final B. Even later on, we get more synths, this one being the most melodic one that we have on top. Started off on that D sharp, really only goes as low as that G sharp on the bottom, and it's only there for a second before it finally resolves on that B at the end. Beyond that, we really don't get any other major synths until the very end, but at this point the texture has become so thick, so I've now just spelled out the explicit harmonies that everything's trying to build together. The harmony going B major over E, F sharp major, D sharp minor, and then G sharp minor. Note now we have this other synth up top, and it's actually very easy to hear, unlike some of the others that have been quite buried. The song ultimately ends harmonically by repeating that B major over E chord and that F sharp major chord, but now it goes to a B major 7 and then a G sharp minor 7 before actually resolving to a B major just to end the song, and you'll notice the melodic synth that's playing over top all this is now just holding out these whole notes.
Verse.
Taylor Swift starting off the song quite low in her range, and honestly her main vocals stay pretty low for the entirety of the song. And the rhythms are quite simplistic as well. Notice how it's really just eighth notes and quarter notes, occasional syncopation, occasional tied notes, and occasional dotted notes.
I was supposed to be sent away, but they forgot to come and get me.
She really doesn't stray much beyond that, and you'll notice even here, she really hammers that low A, really solidifying that she's low in her range. We also have that additional vocal up top, which I'm assuming is Post Malone, and honestly, I can't even figure out what he's saying, if anything at all.
I was a functioning alcoholic till nobody noticed my new aesthetic.
As the first verse continues, it actually becomes more simplistic, honestly. It's more spaced out. There are more quarter notes, but still very low in her range.
All of this to say, I hope you're okay.
As the first verse finally ends, she gets super low in her range. Look at all the ledger lines. And we do have a little bit of dotted 8th and 16th note rhythms for effect, and we have that lovely little bend on the word blame as well.
No one here's to blame, but what about your quiet treason?
The second verse changes a little bit, still mostly focusing on quarter note and 8th note rhythms, occasional melismas, occasional syncopation, but Post Malone comes in and doubles up in harmonies on various lines.
All my mornings are Mondays stuck in an endless February.
The following phrase is essentially identical to the previous one in terms of the harmonies, even in terms of the rhythms, minus that she had to put another offbeat at the very beginning for some changed lyrics.
Took the miracle, move on drug, the effects were temporary.
When we get to the back half of the second verse, though, things change. There's now this very interesting back and forth between Taylor Swift and Post Malone.
And I love you, it's ruining my life.
They essentially then repeat that, given Post Malone's part isn't nearly as long because Taylor Swift ends the second verse as she needs to take us into the chorus, but they're really laying the groundwork because this same idea comes back during the bridge.
I touched you for only a fortnight. But I touched you.
Chorus.
When we get to the chorus, there actually isn't much change from the verse, despite it being the higher energy part of the song. She's still very low in her range. Everything is still all just 8th notes with the occasional quarter note and melisma, given on some of the 8th notes they're more spaced out.
And for a fortnight there we were, forever running to you, sometimes ask about the weather.
It's actually quite impressive, because in pop music you typically see the artist go higher at some point, but Taylor Swift stays on that low side. In the entirety of the chorus, her main vocals never even get on the staff.
Now you're in my backyard, turn into good neighbors. Your wife waters flowers, I wanna kill her.
In the second chorus, which is actually twice as long as the first, which is a trend I've been noticing lately, we have the same thing that happened in the verses. Taylor Swift's part is mostly unchanged, but we have additional harmonies provided by Post Malone over top at various points in the song.
And for a fortnight there we were, forever running to you, sometimes ask about the weather.
The additional vocals from Post Malone pretty much continue throughout the chorus, except on the back half of every other phrase when Taylor Swift is saying she wants to kill somebody.
Now you're in my backyard, turn into good neighbors. Your wife waters flowers, I wanna kill her.
You'll notice when we start the second half of the chorus, it's still pretty much the same thing. Taylor Swift low in her range, pretty much doing the same melodies with some changed rhythms because of changed lyrics, but those Post Malone harmonies do persist.
For a fortnight there we were, together running to you, sometimes calm and time, my sweater.
And just like how the first half ended, the second half ends the same way, although now she's gonna kill a dude as opposed to a woman.
Now you're at the mailbox, turned into good neighbors. My husband is cheating, I wanna kill him.
Bridge.
As I alluded to as we were talking about the second verse, the bridge pretty much just focuses on that I love you, I touched you back and forth between Taylor Swift and Post Malone. Notice how Post Malone, though, has a bunch of harmonies layered over himself, as opposed to Taylor Swift, who at this time is just her main vocal line.
I love you, it's ruining my life.
That idea pretty much continues, but you'll notice at the end of this phrase, they are now singing together in harmony. And note that in the middle, that is Taylor Swift started an additional line before her previous one finished, if that's a bit hard to read.
I touched you for only a fortnight. I touched you.
When we get to the second half of the bridge, everybody gets harmonies. Notice how Taylor Swift is predominantly 3-part harmonies, and Post Malone is predominantly 2-part harmonies.
I love you, it's ruining my life.
They then repeat that, though the end is slightly different as we finally transition into the outro.
I touched you for only a fortnight. I touched you, I touched you.
Outro.
It It is in the outro where Post Malone finally gets to shine. Opening it up just by himself, notice he is similarly lower in his range, never really gets on the staff, but the rhythms are still pretty much the same. It's all eighth notes and quarter notes, occasional syncopation, occasional melisma. But just like in the previous sections, as Post Malone continues on, Taylor Swift now joins at various parts throughout the phrase. As we get to the second half of the outro near the end of the song, Post Malone and Taylor Swift now sing entirely together. And even in the final phrase, we get additional backing vocals, mostly from Taylor Swift. We've done a lot of Taylor Swift music on this channel. We've even touched on the Taylor's versions that she's done. You know, her re-recording her older music, given it pretty much sounds the same. It's interesting to note, though, that because we've done that, we've actually seen this interesting progression in Taylor Swift's sound, going from pretty much a mainstream pop artist and this transition into more of an indie or folk sound. Oddly enough, if you look at her career as a whole, we get even more. We really see that she moved from country to pop to this indie folk sound. So despite the fact that we've covered a lot of the same artist, there's a lot of diversity in that music, and we have this kind of overarching view of how her sound has changed as she's progressed through her career. Now, this would usually be the point where I somehow tie what I'm saying into one of the actual lyrics of the songs, usually right before one of the bigger choruses happen. Unfortunately, I don't really know how to say this without sounding creepy, so we're just gonna transition into her saying,
I touched you, and for a fortnight there we were, forever running to you. Sometimes ask about whoever, now you're in my backyard, turn into good neighbors. Your wife waters flowers, I wanna kill her.
Look, I'm just saying it's the same word. I know they're spelled differently, but Fortnite has done a lot of different things with musical artists like Travis Scott, Marshmello, Ariana Grande. I know Taylor Swift doesn't really seem like the kind of one to do a Fortnite concert, but come on, performing Fortnite in Fortnite?
For a fortnight there we were, together